Hello, welcome to Dungeon Rolls Podcast. I'm your host Justin. Today we're reviewing Pawn of Prophecy by David Eddings. This is book 1 of the Belgariad. I don't know how to pronounce it. This was published by Del Rey in 1982. This is book 1 of 5 of the Belgariad by David Eddings, who created his own fantasy world, and there's three three series, right? In this fantasy setting, right? Which the other books, I thought it was on page 1. Oh yeah, here's the other books. So the Belgariad is 5 books. The Malorarian is 5 books. I have book 1 of the Malorarian, and then you have the Elenium, which is a trilogy, right? So yeah, so I read this book, and I first picked this book up based on the recommendation of Brian Durfees, who's an author, fantasy author on YouTube who does book reviews. And he made a video called Top 40 Fantasy Series, and this was on the video, right? So I picked it up, and I gotta say, I really liked it, despite the fact it's a very short book. It's only 258 pages. It was an interesting read, man. And though I'll say this. A little warning, the prologue of this book is written very archaic-y. So it's written almost kind of in how the Bible's written. So it's those, I think the prologue was 30 pages or something, man. It took me forever to get through the prologue because how it's written, right? Which is, I'll read this is the introduction, right? I'll read it to you just so you get an idea of what the prologue is like. The Tower of the Maimed God. Through the darkness of the city of night, Belgarath the sorcerer passed in the shape of a great wolf, leading J.R.R and his sons to the iron tower of the accursed god. There Belgarath changed again to a man and led the others up the rusted stairs that no man had climbed for 2,000 years. They came to the chamber where the God Torak lay in pain-haunted slumber, his hideous scarred face hidden behind an iron mask. They said it was a steel mask in the book. They passed the god and came at last to the room where the orb of Aldor lay concealed and safe within an iron cask. J.R.R motioned for Belgarath to take the orb, but the sorcerer refused. I cannot touch it. If any man with even a trace of evil in his intent seizes it, it will destroy him as it burned Torak. Only a man of pure heart may take it up to save us from the accursed one. But what man is entirely without evil intent in the silence of his soul? J.R.R asked. So it's it's very Shakespearean archaic kind of thing, man. And they hit you with a lot of terminology, right? It's very Tolkien-esque, man, with the names and the terminology, man. It took me a while to because you have the background for the book is that there's 7 gods, right? And one of the gods went evil, stole this object of power from the one of the gods who were teaching people how to become sorcerers, right? He takes the object of power, which is an orb, and fucks up the planet. Messes up the planet, but burns himself. He becomes Two-Face, where he burns half his body, and his half his face is hideously disfigured, and he was the most beautiful of all the gods, right? And you have he after that the gods went away except for him. He rules his country with an iron fist, right? And the gods had taken the orb and given it to like one kingdom, right? Which all the kingdoms are named after the sons of Torak, who helped the sorcerer Belgarath, like take the orb from the evil god Torak, right? Because they took the orb, put it on a sword, and that way the object of power on top of the sword could be used to help humanity against the evil god, right? And like Torak had like 3 sons, and they all Torak went and formed his own country, and his 3 other sons went off and formed their own countries, and kingdoms were named after like the rulers, right, of the sons of Torak. So like you have like people who are like named after. So you have like different races and peoples are named after the sons of Torak, which was super weird. And also there's like one of the characters in the book, one of the villains, and Torak is also has a similar name to like his country, right, which is ruled by Torak, which was super confusing because like they would mention him, like, wait, are they talking about the guy or the country? So the story of the book is 7,000 years later. Belgarath is like trying to protect the bloodline of the king of Riva, right? Not Rivia, like in like The Witcher, and that line was almost wiped out, right? And only the kings of Riva's bloodline can use the object of power against Torak, right? So what happens is that 7,000 years later, there's only one survivor left of the bloodline, Garion here, who is living on a farm with his Aunt Pol and the people who work on the farm, Faldar's farm, right? She's like in charge of the kitchen at Faldar's farm, where he grows up until he's 14, right? And his Aunt Pol is actually the daughter of Belgarath, and she herself is also an immortal, right? And Belgarath had like a daughter who married into the Riva bloodline, right? And that's why they feel like they have to protect the Riva bloodline. Not just because, if the Riva bloodline dies out, they're screwed and they can't use the orb. But that's the main reason they tell Garion, right? So what happens is like when Garion turns 14, the Murgles, which is one of the race of people from Torak's kingdom, right, who are looking for Garion, right, our characters have no choice but to leave the farm, right. The smith, who has a crush on Aunt Pol, Durnek, joins our group of main characters to travel, right? And while they're traveling, they're not just trying to escape the people that want to kill Garion, but they're also looking for the thief, who's also a sorcerer, who used to be apprentice of Belgarath, who goes by Mr. Wolf here, right? Because he pretends to be a bard, right? It's not until like the end of the book where you find out he's Belgarath the sorcerer, but it was pretty obvious, right? So like they're also looking for who took the object of power. Other characters that join our group is Barak, who's from Torak, who's like a giant of a man, who's like a warrior, right? And you have Silk, who's from Drasnia, right? Which I think is one of the sons, right, of Torak, who's a spy, but you found out later he's also a prince, right? Though he's like the nephew of the king. right? So they go on a journey, right? And before, when they start to get close to their quarry, right, the person they're hunting, they get picked up by by soldiers of one of the kings, and then are forced to like go and like travel to Shirak for this meeting of the kings, that they want to have a meeting with Belgarath the sorcerer to figure out, hey, what the fuck is going on? Uh, is there going to be war in the west? Because that's where the kingdoms are, right? Yeah. So like that's the problem with the book, is that there's not a lot of action, and it's like really short. The most action you get in this book, right, is like a boar hunt, which that also points of this book gave me like Game of Thrones vibes, right? Yeah, there's lots of humor. The book is mostly like a coming of age story with Garion and him trying to figure out his roots, because his Aunt Pol and Mr. Wolf, who he didn't even know that like until the end of the book that was Aunt Pol's father, are being very secretive about him and what his like kind of like what's his role in the things to come, right? But yeah, there are lots of humor, not so much action, but the dialogue in this book was, not in the beginning, but like when things start going, is really good. And I really like the cast of characters. You have the 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 sorcerer, the guy who's like who has a bit of a temper, but he's like very like I would say he's like the cool dad or cool grandpa in the book, because he tells like Gary, hey, I'm not your grandfather, but yeah, you can call me you can call me your granddad. And you have like the Aunt Pol, who's like the kind of like the stern mother. You have like Silk, who is the sly, cunning, but like funny kind of character, right? And like you have to joy the what's the term? The joyful, like happy giant, Shirak, who almost gets Garion killed when he like takes him on the boar hunt. And there's funny scenes, lots of funny scenes when they're at Shirak, right? Because there's this like blind old witch character who trolls Barak that he's going to die soon, right? And there's like a point they're on the way to like go on their boar hunt, and the old witch character is like trolling Shirak. He's like, "You're gonna die. You're gonna meet your doom." And he's like, "That fucking bitch." He grabs like that fucking old witch. He grabs like a fucking spear and tosses it at her, right? And there's like a funny scene, because like it's implied that like Barak and his wife aren't on good terms, so they're going around town, and then they pass by this tavern, and on the window of the tavern there's this girl calling down to Barak. He's like, "Are you going to come see me tonight, my love?" And he's like, and like Garion goes, Barak, that lady's talking to you. It's like, do you? She knows you. It's like she knows everybody. Let's get out of here. Just ignore her. So it's like a lot of great lines in the book, and lots of cool humor in the book. And there's some really touching, emotional scenes with Garion and his like. His Aunt Pol and his not really his grandfather, but like the Belgarath the wizard, or Mr. Wolf as he calls him, because Pol has a nickname for her dad, like, "Oh, you wolf, you mad wolf," or whatever, old wolf, right? So he calls him Mr. Wolf, right? And there's a lot of like emotional scenes with those characters that brought like tears to my eyes several times while reading it. right? So I would say it's a great coming of age, a fantasy adventure story. It's not for people who are not a fan of like like not a fan of like swearing and like even though I swore several times in the review, debauchery and sex and like graphics stuff. There isn't like graphic scenes in the book, right? It's more. This is like something your kid could read, right? Though it kind of is graphic when like when the one god gets uh gets half scorched by the orb, but that's like at the beginning of the book. So yeah, this is a good coming of age story, and I'm giving it 8 out of 10. Right. So for the next review, I'm giving you guys 3 options. There's this D&D book which has average to bad reviews. There's the second Shannara Chronicles book. I know it says book 1, but it's really book 2. The Elfstones of Shannara, right, which just had a TV adaptation. And then there's this book, which is by a local Canadian author, Richard H. Stevens, which this book probably sucks, but I want to give it a try. And the guy says, the author said he was a fan of Stephen Donaldson and like Terry Brooks. So those are like famous names in the fantasy genre. So this could be good. And what's cool about this book is that the main character is a guy who already knows how to fight. Where like a lot of fantasy books, like Tolkien-esque fantasy books, the character has to learn to fight. Here, the guy already knows how to fight. So that's kind of interesting. He's like an exiled knight or something. I don't know. Yeah, so let me know which of these 3 books you want a review of. Also, we have another retro anime theater podcast coming out on Saturday.